Hi everyone, and welcome back to our series on DM tools and tips and techniques, if you like. Today we're going to be sort of talking about running a campaign rather than sort of a one-shot type scenario where you may have fallen into a campaign with your friends or doing something. So we're going to talk about that, and let's kind of jump straight into it. The first point I'd probably make is pacing is very different. So if you've ever been to a convention and run a game there, or you've written a one shot, the pacing is very different. With a campaign, you don't need to edit out or force the pace. So with a one shot, if you're sticking to a particular time period, like I said, sort of like the 3-ish hours mark, you kind of have more content written than you probably get through sometimes, and you'll edit stuff out as a DM to sort of get to your end state. You don't really need to do that with a campaign. You can play through everything because there's no time pressure associated with getting to a specific point by the end of a time period. So, what that does lead to is it leads to kind of a more relaxed type of play style. So, it's not quite in your face, making sure things happen. It's more about relaxing, getting used to the characters, and all of those sorts of things. But what you do need to do is you kind of need to manage the cadence or tempo that you sort of do have with your encounters. With a one shot, generally what I find is that you sort of build up slow, gradually to a crescendo, where at the end you finally have your final encounter, your big battle, your big reveal, whatever, and you sort of end it there. You kind of do that to a lesser or greater extent with campaigns, in that it sort of builds up slowly, then whack, you have the big campaign, your big encounter, then you sort of fall off again, build it slowly up, and so forth. So you kind of do need to manage that tempo and the cadence a little bit with those things. And I think if you sort of look at having a combination of puzzle encounters, role play encounters, combat type encounters, you can sort of manage that ebb and flow quite well. Um, when I'm talking about campaigns, I probably need to make a distinction, because we talk about one shots, we talk about campaigns, and something I talk about is hybrid, where you kind of have a series of linked one shots. So you have your characters, the same characters going through one shot and they get to an end, but then you may use the same characters and build on information to do another one shot and so forth. Um, you can actually run a campaign that way if you like, and you can successfully do that as well too. It's kind of a little bit more constrained and does feel a bit different. It feels like you are running a series of one shots with enduring characters. What I'm talking about here, though, is more an ongoing campaign where you don't have a dedicated spot in which you need to get to in a particular session or a time period. Um, Pacing also is a little bit different when you consider what sort of type of campaign and world you're running. Um, you can run a sandpit type world or a quest driven type world. So, sandpit really is you sort of present the case where things are happening in the world regardless of what the characters do, and they can go anywhere and do anything. And that's kind of great if you like that style of play. Um, it allows your players to explore your world or whatever world you're running through without having to be driven along a particular path. What I do find, though, is a sort of combination: give players a bit of agency in terms of what they do, but have a set quest, have a set, not necessarily linear, but have a set idea about where you need to get to or where the characters need to get to with that. And that also then helps drive the pacing. Whereas I think sandpits, your players can sometimes get a bit lost with that, and that has happened with us in the past. Okay, so second point. This is really the big difference I find with campaigns as opposed to one shots. Note keeping is really, really important. You need to keep notes for yourself, first of all, for where your characters finish a session. So it could just be a little bookmark, but also about what happened in that session, because what's going to happen is you're going to pick up exactly where you left off and then move the story forward. So, depending on how long it is between your sessions, people who are playing weekly, maybe that's not much of a problem. People playing monthly, yeah, it's a little bit more of an issue, because you kind of need to remind your players where they were and what they did, and then to sort of give a bit of a jump start to the pacing of what you're doing. So what I do in regards to that is I used to do when I ran campaigns was do a session summary and then a session introduction. So session summary is really last session we did X, and we start out now doing Y. And you can keep this as a list for yourself, but also it provides a a bit of a prompt for players. You can actually send it out before your session, before your next session, or after your last session, whatever you want to do, just to sort of remind players and sort of keep them engaged between play sessions. The last is notes are super important because in a campaign you're going to have to ad-lib a little bit more than you are in a one-shot. And that ad-libbing may lead to enduring issues, such as when the players talk to an NPC, they may eventually want to go back and talk to that NPC again. So you need to go, well, I've got a list of names and these are possibly the NPCs. Then when you've got to that point, you need to go, well, they've talked to NPC A and I need to record down what they talked to him about and what that NPC was involved with because they might want to go back. And you kind of want to keep that in a structured way because it makes it a whole lot easier when they go, oh yeah, I want to go back and talk to Fred about those potions again. And you don't want to be scrambling through bits and pieces of notes going, who was Fred? What potions? It sort of stops the suspension of disbelief effectively as you're sort of playing through. So notes, super, super important. Point number 3, story threads and side quests. So story threads, I mean, you sort of got an overarching story which you sort of want to reveal as part of your campaign. And that could have various twists and turns. There could be multiple story threads running through depending on how complicated or real world you want to make your campaign. Something I learned probably the hard way is getting the reveal of your story right. If you've sort of got a hidden agenda there, you don't want to reveal it too early, but you don't want to reveal it really late in the piece because you kind of lose the concept of what you're playing. And that's happened to me both times, both too early, too late. So, we all learn our craft as we go when we're writing or running games. So you want to actually keep those overarching stories, pump out your hints about how that story evolves to your players as you sort of go through. Not everything has to relate to the main story. So, you've got a quest, you're going down this quest, you're going bang, 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 A to Z, whatever. But, side quests are quite important too because what they do is they break up that focus on monotony or the inertia that you've got and can be used very well to introduce different things, different characters, different NPCs. And sometimes a bit of light relief as well too. You can bring in a side quest to sort of take down the angst if you're playing a dark fantasy campaign, or maybe introduce some angst if you're playing something light and fluffy to sort of highlight some stuff. So always think about those side quests and maybe sort of like mini modules within your campaign. Fourth point about campaigns is the level of preparation is very different to the level of preparation for a one shot. Playing a one shot, intense, go for it. Preparation for a campaign can be very different. If you're playing regularly with your friends, that could actually go for a very long time and really could be a series of linked stories which really just flow through without a central theme. And that's okay. It really depends on how you go. One thing you do need to do in terms of preparation is to be really flexible, whether you have everything planned out in terms of this is your story, you think it's going to run, this particular part of the campaign is going to run to a point for maybe 6 sessions, maybe 8 sessions, maybe even longer. But what's going to happen is that your players are going to do different things. So you kind of need to be flexible when they do unexpected things. And campaigns are a great way of exploring those threads which subtly will appear or develop as part of player interaction.
I didn't get that.
So keep going with those sorts of things. The last one in terms of preparation is be really, really familiar with the source material, especially if you're playing a third-party product. We were actually going to transition onto a third-party product, which is in fact Curse of Strahd. And what I tend to do is sort of do a cursory reading of the material, get an understanding of what's there, then do a bit of a deep dive. It actually sometimes requires a lot more work on your part to actually go through and do that than it does with your own stuff. So just be prepared because you kind of need to do that as a DM. Number 5, most people think of this as a little bit of a joke, but fundamentally scheduling of sessions is the holy grail. When you've got a group, if you play on a regular basis and you're sort of doing that weekly type stuff, that's probably less of a problem, but most of us have sort of come across issues where scheduling the next session can be harder than actually writing a game. I don't have an answer for this one other than what we generally do is post session either pull out a diary, have a look at when people are free, or I sort of pull out when I'm free, sort of for the next session plan, give about 3 or 4 options over Messenger or Discord or something, and people go, yeah, we're all free that day, so then we just log it in. Um, the other thing about campaigns is you can actually play a session without your full complement, whereas sometimes with one shots, if you especially got pre-gen characters, it can be a little bit harder. Um, how you deal with that is a little bit different. They could be off on a side quest themselves and taken out of the equation for that session. They could be, as we call them, cardboard cutouts and be there but kind of not actively played. How you do it's up to you and your play style and your team. So really, you can keep going. So you can keep your story moving without having to worry about players missing out. The other thing is really campaigns sometimes lend themselves to actually bringing on newer players. So you can be in the middle of a campaign and someone goes, "Oh, geez, I'd like to join." And if you could fit them in terms of space, it does allow you the option of actually bringing in new characters, and sometimes that can be a good thing because it can reinvigorate, change the dynamic a little bit. Again, have to be a little bit careful in terms of how all of that works, but certainly that's something that you can do in a campaign as you sort of go through. And again, more players, it's easier than to drop one for a session if you need to, but that's it. Um, Last point, probably one we don't talk about a lot when we talk about campaigns, is when to call it quits. More often than not, I've found, unfortunately, with a lot of campaigns, is they peter out. Usually go through the first couple of story arcs, and then everyone just gets a bit tired and maybe wants to do something different. So the length of a campaign that you want to run, or the number, let me say it differently, the number of sessions you want to run is kind of going to be different. The reason I talk about number of sessions is, like I said, some people might play weekly, some people might play monthly, some people might play for months on end. You don't know. So think about your length of your campaign. And something I've tried to do with my more recent work is break it up. So have an idea about an overarching story, and then have maybe a first stage or second stage or a third stage of a campaign, which might go from 6 to sort of 10 sessions even. And you can kind of get to an outcome there, and you can build things through. Again, be flexible about how you do that, but that kind of helps you, and you can sort of get to a point and you go, are we all enjoying this? Yes, we'll continue on to the next bit. If not, then you can wrap it up quite easily and then move on to something else. Um, and that kind of brings up the point of, is your campaign dynamic or organic? So organic, I mean, you generally have a set of players or characters which people have been playing for a while, and you sort of just bounce from story to story, and it develops over time. Nothing wrong with that. Or you have a design where you have a story arc which you fit to. So, and often that comes back down to the stamina of the players, how invested they are in their characters, how much they want to keep playing their characters. So it's much better to have people who want to keep playing their characters, and maybe take a break, than it is where people go, well, I'm a little bit over it, and I want to do something different. So again, completely down to your play style, your DMing style, and your group's norms in terms of what they want to do. Anyway, this one's gone a little bit longer than normal. I hope you got something out of it, and please just remember, it's all for fun. Enjoy playing. Cheers.